In 2023, buying a dozen eggs in Buenos Aires cost the equivalent of an entire day's wages for the average Argentine worker. Not a week, not a month. One full day of your life just to buy eggs. I know because I grew up there. I watched it happen. Not on the news, not in a textbook, in real life, at the supermarket, in my own family, prices doubling every few months, savings accounts evaporating in real value, people lining up at ATMs that were already empty, a government printing money so fast that the ink on the bills was barely dry before the bill was already worth less. And here's what nobody tells you about living through an economic collapse. It teaches you things about money that no book, no finance course, and no YouTube channel can teach you. Stay with me until the end of this video, because I'm going to show you a specific number about the US economy, a number that most Americans walk right past without noticing. I noticed it immediately, because I'd seen that pattern before. Argentina has experienced more economic crises in the last 50 years than most countries face in centuries. We've had hyperinflation, where prices rose so fast that supermarkets change price tags twice a day. We've had sovereign debt defaults. We've had a frozen banking system, the Corralito, where the government literally locked people out of their own bank accounts for months. We've had a currency that lost more than 99% of its value over 2 decades. I'm not telling you this to be dramatic. I'm not here to scare you. I'm telling you this because it's the backdrop that makes everything I'm about to share actually useful. Because here's the thing I realized when I started paying attention to the US economy from the outside. The financial forces that destroyed ordinary Argentines are not unique to Argentina. They are the same forces operating in the United States, in Europe, and in most of the world right now. The difference is just the speed. In Argentina, things happened fast, dramatically, visibly, painfully. Prices tripled in a year. The currency lost half its value in weeks. Nobody could ignore it. In the United States, the same process is slower, quieter, more polite, more invisible. And because I've seen the fast version up close, I can recognize the slow version when it's happening. Today, I'm going to share 3 lessons that Argentina burned into my brain permanently. 3 things that completely changed how I think about money, savings, and protecting what I work for. These are not theoretical. I didn't read these in a book. I watched them happen to real people. People I know, people I care about. Let's get into it. Most people hear the word inflation and think prices are going up. That's technically accurate, but it completely misses the point. Inflation is not just about prices. Inflation is a transfer of wealth from people who hold cash to people who hold assets, from savers to debtors, from the bottom to the top. Let me make that concrete. Imagine you worked hard all year and saved $10,000. You put it in your bank account. You feel good about it. That was real time, real effort, real sacrifice. Now imagine inflation runs at 8% that year, which, by the way, is exactly what happened in the United States in 2022. At the end of that year, your account still says $10,000. But what you can actually buy with that money, in terms of real goods and services, is only worth about $9,200 in the prices of the year before. You lost $800 and nobody sent you a bill, no notification, no line item on your bank statement. It just quietly disappeared. In Argentina, that same process ran at 50% per year, then 100%, then 211%. A family that spent 5 years saving to buy an apartment watched that savings become nearly worthless in 18 months. I saw that happen in my own neighborhood. Inflation is not a news story, it's not a political debate. It is a real, measurable, ongoing reduction of your purchasing power happening every single day you hold cash. The question is never, should I worry about inflation? The question is always, what am I doing so that my money grows at least as fast as inflation is eating it? If your savings account is paying 0.5% interest and inflation is running at 4%, you are losing money, slowly, quietly, politely, but you are losing it. The Argentine lesson: never let money sit still. Moving money is not greed, it's survival. That's lesson 1. Now let's talk about something even more dangerous and more common. Before Argentina's 2001 crisis, there was a specific type of person that everyone knew about: They were called los que guardaban en el colchón, the mattress savers. These were ordinary people, teachers, small business owners, retired couples, people who had lived through enough economic chaos that they didn't trust banks anymore. And honestly, given what Argentine banks had done to people over the years, you can't really blame them. So they kept cash, real physical cash, hidden in their homes, in mattresses, in closets, in envelopes taped to the back of drawers. Some of them buried it in the backyard. In 1999, their savings were real. In 2001, when the Corralito hit, when the government froze all bank accounts, the mattress savers felt smart for a brief moment. Their cash was accessible. Others couldn't touch their accounts. But then in 2002, the peso devalued by more than 70% against the dollar in a matter of months. A neighbor of my family had saved the equivalent of 40,000 US dollars over 23 years of working as a school teacher. By 2002, the real value of what she had saved was around $11,000. 23 years of work reduced by 70%. Not because she spent it recklessly, not because she made bad investments, because she held it in cash. Now I know what you're thinking. That's Argentina. That's extreme. That can't happen here. And you're probably right. It won't happen with that kind of speed or drama. But here's what is happening right now in the United States. The US dollar has lost approximately 20 to 25% of its purchasing power over the last 5 years. That is not a forecast, that is a measured fact. If you had $100,000 sitting in a standard savings account paying near zero interest in 2019, the real purchasing power of that money today is closer to $76,000, even though your account still says 100,000. I want to be completely clear. I am not predicting a collapse. I am not here to sell you fear. I am sharing what I learned from watching a real collapse happen to real people. And what I learned is this: holding cash long term is not safety. It is a guaranteed, slow, invisible loss. The only question is how much you're willing to lose before you do something about it. The people in Argentina who came out of the crises with their wealth relatively intact shared one behavior. They had converted their savings into things, into assets, into anything that would hold real value regardless of what the government printed or what happened to the currency. Real estate, dollars held abroad, stocks in foreign markets, gold. Not because they were financial experts, because necessity forced them to learn something that most people in stable economies never have to think about. The Argentine lesson: cash is not an asset. Cash is a position, and over time, it is a losing one. Two lessons down. The third is the most practical, and the one I wish someone had explained to me much earlier. Stay with me, because after this, I'm going to show you the number I mentioned at the very beginning. In Argentina, there's a concept that became part of everyday conversation in a way that it never does in more stable countries: the idea of real value versus represented value. Paper money represents value. A government bond represents value. The balance in a savings account represents value. But they are representations, numbers on paper or on a screen, backed by institutions that can change the rules. A house is real. A productive business is real. An index fund that owns a piece of hundreds of actual companies, companies with employees, products, customers, is connected to real economic activity in the real world. The Argentine experience showed very clearly which of those two categories held up under pressure and which one didn't. Now, and I want to be clear that this is not financial advice. I am not a licensed advisor. Everything I share is based on my own perspective and experience. Here is the framework that living in Argentina gave me. Every dollar I save, I ask one question: is this money growing at least as fast as inflation? If the answer is no, I find somewhere that it will. For most ordinary people, people who are not Wall Street professionals, people who don't have time to study markets, that framework leads to three pretty simple moves. First, a high yield savings account instead of a traditional savings account. The difference in interest rates right now can be 4 to 5 percentage points. That's the difference between your cash losing ground to inflation and keeping pace with it. There is no reason to leave that on the table. Second, broad market index funds. Not individual stocks, not cryptocurrency, not any specific sector or hot trend. Index funds that track the overall market, because historically, over long periods, productive businesses generate more real value than inflation destroys. That is the entire thesis, and it has held up for over a century. Third, time. The single most powerful asset that an ordinary person has is time in the market, not timing the market. Time in the market, starting early and staying in. In Argentina, the people who didn't have the luxury of waiting because the crisis was already here lost the most. The people who had already made these moves before the crisis, in the quiet, normal years, came out far better than those who waited. The lesson is not to wait until there's a crisis to start thinking about this. The lesson is to start now while the situation is still stable enough that you have real options. The Argentine lesson: the best time to protect your money is before you need to. The second best time is right now. Remember, at the very beginning of this video, I said I was going to show you a number about the US economy that I recognized immediately because I'd seen the pattern before. Here it is. The United States is currently paying more than $1 trillion per year in interest on its national debt. $1 trillion per year, just in interest. Not paying down the debt, just servicing it, just keeping the lights on the loan. For the first time in American history, the US government spends more on debt interest payments than it does on national defense. When I saw that number, I felt something I can only describe as recognition, because that is the exact pattern that preceded every major crisis I saw in Argentina. Not the same numbers, not the same timeline, but the same underlying dynamic. A government that is spending more on the cost of its past debt than on its current functions, filling the gap by printing more money and quietly passing the real cost to ordinary citizens through inflation. I want to be very explicit here. I am not saying the United States is going to collapse like Argentina. These are fundamentally different economies. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. US institutions are stronger. These differences are real and they matter. What I am saying is this: the warning signs that Argentines learn to dismiss are worth noticing, and noticing them cost you nothing. That is the lens that Argentina gave me. Not panic, not doom, just awareness, and a set of financial habits that work whether the economy is booming or breaking down. 3 things Argentina taught me that apply directly to your money right now. 1. Inflation is not just rising prices. It is a real, ongoing reduction of your purchasing power. Treat it that way. 2. Holding cash long term is a guaranteed slow loss. Every dollar sitting still in a zero interest account is a dollar working against you. 3. Real assets hold real value. Paper represents value. Know the difference and make sure more of your money is in the first category than the second. The people who came through Argentina's worst moments with something left were not the ones who panicked. They were the ones who understood these rules early and acted before everyone else was forced to. You now understand those rules. What you do with that is entirely up to you. If this changed how you think about your money even slightly, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this reach people who need to hear it. And if you want to know the exact steps I follow, in order, from zero, based on everything I just shared, that's what the next video is about. It's right here. See you in the next video.